Welcome to the Scoliosis Dialogues. This is the official podcast of the Scoliosis Research Society, and we are once again coming to you live on tape from the annual meeting in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I am here with the 2026 Lifetime Achievement Award winner, Dr. John Emans. So thank you, Dr. Emans, for joining us on the podcast today.
Well, it's a real honor and privilege to have gotten this award. The SRS has been an incredible, important part of my existence and professional career, so I feel particularly honored.
And so at the beginning of each podium, there is a slide that has our disclosures. And I have to give a disclosure and a bias that not only is John Emans probably the most important professional relationship that I have, he is also my office mate. So as you're listening to this podcast, if you think that I am being too deferential or making him sound too good, you're right. And that's going to be okay. We're going to go with it today. And so what I'd like to start off with, John, is just letting the listeners know a little bit about you from a biographical standpoint. So early life, geography and family, who are you and where do you come from?
Well, I grew up in upstate New York in a semi-rural community. I profited greatly from the time. It was a time at which there was a lot of National Scoliosis Foundation money poured into high school and elementary school education in the sciences. The community I was in was right next to the General Electric Research Laboratory, so there are many families who worked there, and the Knowles Atomic Power Laboratory, so there are many science-interested families there. Both my parents had advanced degrees, and even though we were in a semi-rural community, there was lots of push to do well in school and pay attention, particularly to science. My next-door neighbor also turned out to be a science teacher. We did a lot of astronomy together. We ground lenses together, did lots of cool things. So early on, I got interested in science.
And anyone in your family that was directly involved in medicine at the time?
Not at all. No tendency to medicine. But in looking back about why I might have chosen medicine, I can remember two people. One was a next door neighbor who was a refugee from the Second World War. He was German. He was a physician. He had been part of the Battle of Leningrad and had marched all the way back to Germany on foot in that tremendous time. And I had great respect for him. And then the other person was a general surgeon who was a friend of my family. So I think in looking back, kind of the people who seemed to have the respect in the community, retrospect, it was physicians.
So let's talk a little bit about your educational profile, because you managed to move somewhere when you were 18 and stay there for the entirety of your life.
Yes, well, that was not on purpose. I desperately wanted to go to Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. Got in there and other places, but when I went to visit Harvard just seemed to be an incredibly international place. There were people in all sorts of costumes from all sorts of places in the world. And I thought, gee, I'd be ashamed to pass this up. So I ended up at Harvard.
And so you stayed at Harvard for college, medical school, residency, and your career. And the question isn't why stay at one place, but necessarily maybe why not ever leave? Because I know there was an incredible amount of opportunity for you, particularly throughout your professional career.
Yes, well, it certainly wasn't planned that way at all. None of it was planned. I started out as a physics major in college and rapidly discovered that I wasn't smart enough to be a physics major. Flipped over into German history and literature, and from that flipped into religion. And from that ended up flipping into biochemistry. I had planned to go to Columbia Medical School and was accepted at Columbia Medical School. Harvard Medical School had a second round of admissions, sort of the first round. My wife got in on the first round. She wasn't my wife then, but my to-be wife got in on the first round because she was junior AOA, Phi Beta Kappa, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I got in on the second round on the athlete, nice guy quota, and decided to go to Harvard as a result, just because it seemed to be a bit better. And then when it came at the end of medical school, we swore that we were going to leave Boston. 8 years in Boston was enough. We went and looked everywhere for the right combination of a pediatric residency for my wife and a general surgery residency for me, because my plan was to go into general surgery. And everywhere we went, where one was good, the other was not good. And so we said, well, just a couple more years in Boston. We'll go across the street because they're good residencies. And then we got out of sync, and then it just became a whole lot better to stay.
Absolutely. And so you started at Boston Children's in 1978. And at the time, John Hall was there, and certainly a larger than life presence within the hospital and within pediatric orthopedics as a whole. And so what are things that you feel that you learned from Dr. Hall that are still relevant today? And who else would you have called a mentor during that time?
Yes, well, John Hall was indeed a larger than life presence. I'm often asked, well, why did I stay there? And at the time I made the decision, several people said, well, why do you want to go to Boston and be a small frog in John Hall's pond? And indeed, I was a very small frog in John Hall's pond, but the other frogs were excellent fun. People like Lau McKaylee, Hugh Watts, Ted Riseborough, excellent mentors. And I learned a lot from them. So it worked out to be really better to stay and be a small frog than move on to somewhere else and be in charge of things. And that's kind of been the story since then. John Hall was chief for quite some time. Then Paul Griffin took over as chief for a while. And I must say that I think I learned surgical technique and surgical ideas from John Hall. But I learned more about natural history, more about physical exam, and more about caring for the patient from Paul Griffin. Paul Griffin, I think, was underappreciated. He was really a great at that time. Subsequent to that, I think people like Jim Kasser, Peter Waters, Mike Willis, we've all learned from them. And as you must know, we learn from our trainees. Fellows talk about us training them, but I think the reality is that it's a two-way street. We learn as much from our trainees as they do the other way around.
So let's talk a little bit about your life and roles within the SRS. And so when did you become active in the Scoliosis Research Society, and what drove your involvement?
Well, John Hall was very much involved in the SRS and the founder, and all along I was very much interested in spine, so joining the SRS was natural. And I think I joined in 1981. I'd have to go back and look and see when it was. And then I was on several committees. The Natural History Committee, we struggled with trying to do a review of the natural history data. We did some safety issues, and eventually I became secretary. I was secretary for, I think, maybe 4 years or 3 years. Then subsequently been part of other committees and initiatives. But in the background, SRS has always been the most important institution in my existence.
And so you've spoken about two different roles, one being secretary and also working with natural history. Is there something within the society that you are particularly proud of for your contribution?
I think the thing I'd be most proud of is the joint recommendation on safety and neuromonitoring. We spent a lot of time and effort trying to come up with a usable set of guidelines in the operating room at the moment of neurologic change. And it sounds easy to do, but get a dozen learned people in one room and try to come up with something that can act as an actual algorithm. We spent a long time doing it. It still exists and is posted in lots of operating rooms. We did that for the stable spine. We then tried to do the same thing for the potentially unstable spine, and it just became unworkable. There were so many potential options that we finally gave up and said there's not a good option for, there's not a way to make an algorithm for the unstable spine. But I think of all things, I think that would be one. The other would be we had a whole day once, whole symposium on bracing in adolescent idiopathic scoliosis. I think we managed to convince a few people the efficacy of bracing. We also kept for a long time bracing manuals on the website available to the public and to SRS members.
I think it's interesting and important that you mentioned bracing is one of the things that you're most proud of, because we do think of our role as surgeons first and foremost, but if an ounce of prevention is worth quite a bit, then tell me, I guess just to get more into that, what role has bracing played within your career, and what role do you think kind of new age braces can play in the future?
We joked and debated off and on over the years about how the SRS really had gone from being the Scoliosis Research Society to being the SSS, the Scoliosis Surgery Society, and how could we get away from that? One of the ways was to try to be more inclusive to non-surgeons. Another was to foster more seminars, more research papers on non-operative treatment, and I think we've only been partially successful. For me individually, I learned a lot about bracing from Hugh Watts and became involved very early in the development of the Boston brace. Spent a lot of time in the U.S. and around the world teaching bracing technique for individuals. I regret that bracing has potentially moved on from the purview of pediatric orthopedic surgeons and orthopedic surgeons in general to chiropractors and to physical therapists and to non-surgical practitioners. I don't think surgeons are as invested as they might be. We did an informal poll about a decade ago at a surgeons SRS meeting, kind of who does bracing, and only about half of the audience said that they did bracing. And then we said, well, who thinks it really makes a difference? And that was even less. It was about a quarter. Stu Weinstein, who's very much a surgeon and spent a lot of time and energy doing the braced trial, and convinced himself and the naysayers that bracing can, and the emphasis is on can, make a difference in scoliosis. I think that the new braces, there are all sorts of remarkable new techniques. The problem is implementation, trying to get those new techniques to the street level of usage. Same problem was with the Boston brace. The original idea of the Boston brace was to create something that was exportable, that you with the right set of instructions could do a good brace even though you didn't do braces very often. And that sort of worked. And I hope that the new brace technology is also going to be exportable. But it's exciting if you're interested in bracing.
And so touching on new brace technologies, you started in 1978. You've mentioned your involvement with the Boston brace. And so you've seen a few iterations, whether in non-operative or operative, of the newest, the technique that's going to save the day. Is there a specific skill or a specific piece of technology even from 1978 that you believe is uniquely important in 2025?
That's a interesting question, but I think it's probably the concept of fusion. We've moved beyond worrying about fusion to instead worrying about stabilization and instrumentation, and I fear that much of what has been put in over this last 2 decades will eventually show up with metal failure because nobody paid attention to a fusion. In 1978, the instrumentation was poor and by no means rigid, so we had to compensate for that by doing an excellent decortication and fusion and grafting. And as the instrumentation has gotten better and better and better, there's less attention paid to that. Eventually, the metal will fatigue in many places, and so I think that in the future, maybe we'll pay a little bit more attention to fusion.
Excellent. And so, amongst the current array and trends of technology and new techniques, whether it's AI or robotics or vertebral body tethering, is there something that you are particularly excited about for the future?
Yes, that's a good question. I I think that making it possible for the average surgeon to do an excellent job is more and more within reach. The more enabling technologies there are. So, John Hall was a superb surgeon, and John Hall could do all sorts of things and be successful with it. Many of his trainees who were exposed to his techniques and procedures went out and tried to do it, and because they were not John Hall, they didn't necessarily succeed. And I would hope that enabling technologies will make everybody a good surgeon rather than just an average surgeon. So I think there's hope for them.
And so I want to transition a little bit into your life as part or one half of a power couple in medicine. And so you are a great surgeon, a great teacher, really great enough to have won a Lifetime Achievement Award. But the fact of the matter is you might be second fiddle in your own home to another great physician, someone who has invented a field of adolescent medicine, invented a field of adolescent gynecology, and Dr. Gene Emans. And so how do you navigate being one part of that? And then how do the two of you balance your dual obligations?
Yeah, well, Jean has done amazing things with her career. It's no longer unusual for two physicians to be married. When we first got married early in medical school, it was amazing. We got interviewed about 3 times by various survey people, kind of like that. Well, how do you do this? How do both of you work, or both of you go to medical school at the same time? And it was kind of like, what? How can this be so hard? Well, who does the dishes? Well, well, whoever's able to. Well, who does the laundry? Well, it's kind of who's ever got the who does the grocery shopping? Well, I don't, it depends. It's kind of so you just work it out, just like you do with childcare. You work it out. In looking back, our careers were in some ways all-consuming. We spent time at our careers, and any spare time we spent with children. That was kind of it. We didn't go to the country club or have tennis lessons or do other things that were not child related. So I think that's how we got through it, and how the kids are more or less normal. Also, Jean was able to be at home more, so they were raised more by Jean, so they're more normal.
And so as we close out, one, I want to thank you for doing this. Thank you for a lifetime of service to educate the rest of us, be part of the SRS, and to what you've given for your patients. And then ask, what are your final thoughts or advice for the younger members of the SRS? People who fancy that one day they might be standing up to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Well, one of the things we didn't talk about, but I wanted to say anyway, is that I think that the one thing I'm most proud of is what my trainees have become. It's a tremendous honor to have been part of the careers of many trainees. So that's a big proud. But so what I leave behind is a hope for the future for them. I fear that with all the interposition of practice extenders, advanced practice clinicians, I fear that the surgeon-patient interaction will change for the worse. That surgeons will become technicians, respond to a set of guidelines for choosing to do an operation, and will then leave follow-up and discussions and information to the advanced practice providers. And in the process, we'll lose some part of the doctor-patient relationship. And I know it sounds corny to talk about the doctor-patient relationship, but in the end, that's probably the most gratifying thing of all about being a physician, is to say that you have taken care of a particular patient, if that patient feels like they have been cared for. So I hope that that can persist in spite of technology and new practice innovation.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being part of the Scoliosis Dialogues podcast.
My pleasure.
Thank you.